Hi everybody, lovely to be here. I'm wanting to report to you one slice of data out of the Global Pastors Survey. In fact, I called it the Global Adventist Pastors Survey just so that we know that it is Adventist pastors. Just a little bit of background. Who wanted to know the research results and what are they trying to find out? Well, it was the top leadership of the Adventist Church. This is one of the research projects that they had commissioned, and it's managed out of the Office of Archive Statistics and Research, led by David Trim. And down the bottom you see pictures of my research collaborators. They gave us a shopping list. This is obviously a group of people sitting around thinking, well, what would we like to find out? And they don't have a research supervisor saying you can only choose one or two of those. So the result was a really long list and a humongous survey. So it's a remarkable. I had about 75% completion rate for the survey. So that's one of the things I'll be thanking people for. I have a lot of people that helped. We have here Peter Chinchala. We have Michael Campbell, who did most of the collection of data across the North American Division. We have Rodrigo Romanelli from the South American Division. And I mean, he pursued this. So when we get to look at the actual numbers and percentage rates, you will see that the South American Division has the most reliable set of data because, thank you, Pastor Romanelli. And I will mention Rudy Sitamarang from the SSD because he listened to my spiel, which I'd given to everybody, which was, wouldn't it be lovely to get everybody on Zoom and I introduce it and they all start at the same time? We actually did that. We did 3 separate Zoom meetings, one in English, two in English and one translated into Indonesian. And they had up to 1,000 participants in the survey. Well, they could have up to 1,000 participants. They had over 500. And so we got fabulous data and we saw it happen live before our eyes. So they are great. And they're just a small group of the people that made this happen. And I've listed them all down there. And we had 28 translations. It was translated into 28 languages. So that's 28 translators and 28 people checking them. Galena Steel, and most importantly, the 13,781 people that actually filled in the survey. We couldn't use them all, but that is a huge commitment of people's time. Now here are the participant numbers, and as a percentage of those listed as ordained pastors in the Seventh-day Adventist statistical report. So if you run your eye down there, I've highlighted the South American Division. They had 84% of their pastors participate. And we have several over 50%. And overall, we had 44% of the ordained pastors. Well, this is a proxy, right? So it's approximately 40 to 45% of those working in local churches did the survey. You'll notice that I've listed the divisions there. Those familiar with these statistics know this map. So what strikes me about this data and the data from the members survey and the data from the institutional workers survey is its reach. This is extraordinary data from right across the globe. One of the things I did think about is I'm reporting to you by division and I'm reporting in church papers by division. But outside of the church papers, I'll be reporting by country, and we got quite a good set of data from those countries. You'll notice Brazil sort of dominates. What we did is we took a percentage from each. We expressed every division results as a percentage and averaged the percentage. So these are not just Brazil's numbers, these are an average. Talking about the pastoral experience. Several questions talked about, how do you think about being a pastor? It seems to fit my gifts and talents. 91% agreed. Extraordinary. 93% said they feel that they were in the place that God had called me to. 90% of pastors agreed or strongly agreed, I enjoy being a pastor. Given the job that a pastor does, this is a remarkably high number. And 84% said, I know that God has called me to be a pastor. And down the bottom you can see the bars. The red at the extreme right is I really don't know. The orange is strongly agree and going backwards. So let's look at one of these questions in more detail. Let's look at being a pastor seems to fit my gifts and talents. And as you can see, what I did is I and a research assistant, turned these numbers into percentages for each column and then averaged the column to get the average of the 13. The GC was more interested in the total average rather than individual divisions, I felt. In fact, they explicitly told me that. Robert, we're not so much interested in divisions, we want the overall picture. I think this is fascinating. Right, now your problem, if you're in the room, it's not so bad because it's a lovely big screen. And down the bottom there, we go ECD, ESD, IAD, EUD, NAD, NSD, SAD. Well, you can read it. It's easy. You probably can't on Zoom. My apologies. It's alphabetical from left to right. And as you can see, there's quite a deal of variation between the divisions. And we have represented here people from many different divisions. You're probably curious to see what your division looks like. So you can do that, and you can also pick out the divisions where there is more uncertainty as to whether they should say yes or no. How much does your work of a pastor help you fulfill your own call of God to full-time ministry? And again, there is a considerable division here. Down the bottom is the response, nearly everything I do helps me fulfill my call as a pastor. Now, I realise that some of us in the room have a pastoral background, but most of us may not. So let me tell you about the job of a pastor. Committees. And let me tell you about more of the job of a pastor. Happened to be looking at Carl, who looks after the PA at the Pioneer Memorial. Talking to the PA guys and keeping them comfortable and happy. I'm sure Carl's easy to get along with, but it's not always the case. Get in the grounds, answering a million questions, getting rung up in the middle of the night. My marriage is falling apart, Pastor, come and fix it. There's a sudden death in the family, rebellion, that really just upsets your whole apple cart. Yeah. And they sometimes preach, and they sometimes give Bible studies. So there's an awful lot happening in a pastor's life, and much of it out of his control. So I am impressed that so many say that nearly everything they do is fulfilling their call to ministry. And then the darker green bar is the not quite so certain, but still more on agreement than others. But as again, you can see that it varies considerably according to the division that you're in. Now here are some other results which I've put as in the positive side, right? Social scientists are not to have imposed their own values on things, but I think these are good results. 79% felt the church pastor fulfills their call of God. 94%, I serve the mission of the church through my work as a pastor. 94% said they would be a committed Seventh-day Adventist church member for the rest of their lives, which again is an interesting question. And 86% said that they will be working as a minister in the 10 years' time if they do not retire. So that's one of two questions we asked on, are you planning to stay by the job that you're in? Now there are some results which you might put under the, well, these are a bit alarming column. So here is one. I feel run down and drained of physical and emotional energy. Now that's one of the items, not exactly the same wording, but it's an item that turns up on a depression scale, isn't it? So we got 15, Strongly agreed, 29 agreed more than disagreed. 10%, I feel that I have no one to talk to or counsel with, and a further 20% agreed more than disagreed, so that's a total of 30%. I get discouraged because nobody cares, 28%, and 10% said sometimes I would rather like to leave pastoral ministry. So let's look at some of these by division, and again, there are differences between the divisions, which are kind of interesting, and I'll give you a moment to pick out your division and then look at what the other divisions are. And here is a really, really interesting one. This is the sometimes I'd like to leave. So only 10% strongly agree on that, but they are clustered in certain parts of the world, and it's interesting to look at where they are and compare your prejudices and other things about what might lie behind some of these differences. Now, I don't know if you know the site, pastoralcareinc.com statistics. It's worth a look at, and it's pretty interesting and alarming. Here is their number one lead report. 38% of pastors, this is just in general, are thinking of quitting the ministry. 51%, that's 1 out of every 2 pastors in mainline denominations. Of the 38%, almost half are under the age of 45. 50% of pastors are age 56 and above, and 22 stats reveal a rise. Now, how do pastors in the Adventist Church compare? And we did restrict the responses to pastors actually actively in a pastoral role in the Adventist Church. So we had 10% strongly agreed that sometimes I feel that I'd like to leave pastoral ministry, and 18% agreed more than disagreed. So it's a glass half full or a glass half empty thing, isn't it? It's alarming that 38% of Adventist pastors think, well, I might just quit my job, but it's better than some other churches. Here's a couple of other comparisons. Sometimes I'm unable to pay my bills. On average, 57% of pastors in all denominations say yes to that question. And in the Adventist pastors, it's 70% strongly agreed, 24% agreed. And then there's the 2 questions about their state of anxiety. So do you want to see the results? Well, yes. We are committed to publishing, and just a bit of free advertising. I was very impressed, Safari, when you put up all the books from ASTA, that 3 of them came from research that I was involved in, and they were all published from Avondale Academic Press. So there's some preliminary work on the institutional institutional workers surveys, but the actual survey for the pastors, the report given to the GC is available. I normally find it by going to the ASTA website, then going down and picking out research, and then going to the research sponsored by the General Conference leadership. We have papers in preparation, and we have papers for academic journals. I want to leave you with a couple of things. Yes, there are some results of concern. Not as many as I expected, quite frankly. I was interested to know the results of all the questions we asked, and we asked quite a number. So there are some positive things. Pastors like doing what they're doing. They feel that they're fulfilling their mission and that they are responding to the call of God. So that is enormously positive. Okay, thank you very much.